Hello from Northwest Indiana in January. I wanted to talk a little bit about frostbite today. And this is a typical day here, like we've been having the last couple weeks in Northwest Indiana. We are in what you consider snow belt. We get a ton of lake effect snow if those bands of snow happen to fall on us. But today, the humidity is 74% outside, the temperature is 18, and the wind chill is 8. We just came off a 13-day streak of temperatures that never reached 20. So, and most of the time those temperatures were hovering around 0, highs of like maybe 5. At one point we got down to 17 below 0. So what I wanted to talk about today is frostbite and how it's something that we battle continuously here. Some of the things, like, you can recognize it. Some of the things maybe you can do to prevent it or minimize it, and definitely how to deal with it once it happens. This is inside my first coop, and it is insulated in here, so it normally stays about 10 degrees warmer than it is outside. But during this last crazy cold snap that we had, I do have frostbite happening in here. And I want to show you, this is my rooster. If you have big combed and wattled roosters, they'll tend to suffer the most. And you can see on his comb, he's already lost a few points, probably from last year. And that's what frostbite does. You can see he's got some white on the tips and then black on the very top. And those black parts most likely are going to fall off and just kind of leave his little points a little duller. What I find most troubling is on him, he got some frostbite on his wattles. And this has been over, maybe a week ago. But you can see it's kind of black on the edges of his wattles. And that can happen with these big guys. So I'll show you some on my hens. These leghorns or leghorns, however you prefer to say it, they suffered in this cold snap, unfortunately. Got some frostbite on them. You can see there on the points, got a little black. But what you're going to see first, mostly, is going to be white. Unfortunately, just about everybody got a little bit of frostbite in here. And we do have ventilation in our coop. We'll talk, ew, somebody pooped on him. We'll talk a little about ventilation. Ventilation is the best thing you can do. And up here on each end of our coop, we have one in the back. We have one in the front. You can even see that sunlight coming through. But we have these open vented areas, so the wind should just kind of roll through. And you can even watch the spider webs moving. I know there's air flowing through. And we have that hardware cloth, so it is predator proof. So they have some ventilation going, but I really think here, when we've just got this constant snowfall and humidity, it just stays humid here. I don't know. I think we just kind of fight a losing battle sometimes. So that is what your frostbite looks like. So we can talk about ways you can prevent it. One thing I don't do anymore that I've heard, people say, oh, give them warm treats. And one time I gave them some warm oatmeal on a very, very cold day. And all my little Orpingtons, that's what I had then, got some frostbite on their wattles. I felt terrible because that moist food stuck to their wattles. So I try to stick to only dry foods. Like I might give them some scratch grains. If it's warmer, like say 20, 25, 30, I might give them some of that stuff, but I don't do oatmeal anymore. I might give them scrambled eggs or something that's not quite as sticky and moist. So try to avoid that if you can. Another thing that I do is I take them in, and I'm going to show you what my warming stations look like, but if it starts getting really cold, I will start moving them in. If I start seeing frostbite, like the last time we had that cold snap and I started seeing this kind of frostbite on my roosters, I went ahead and took them in for the last couple days of it. If they seem like they're really suffering, I had one silly down here that seems to be trying to molt right now, so she had been in for most of it. So you just need to really keep an eye on your chickens. But I'll be honest, we have frostbite here every year to some degree, and I'm sure it's not comfortable for them or pleasant, but they seem to do well. For instance, these girls right here are still laying every single day. They laid right through that cold snap. So I know that they're doing okay. They still look good. They're eating. Roosters can be very badly affected, though. It can affect fertility, I hear, and things, so I do keep an eye on them. One time we had an instance of our rooster got his wattles so badly frostbitten they swelled up and were a disaster. He had to be brought in. He couldn't even really eat well for a while. So I always keep an eye on that for sure. Don't let it get out of hand. But overall, I believe chickens do okay. Frostbite just seems to be an unpleasant side effect of what we have going on here. One thing I do that I feel has made a bigger difference this year, even though, again, I still have some frostbite, is to keep them in. Like today, I showed you the weather. It's windy, it's wet, so I just keep them in. So unfortunately, they're spending a lot more time inside, but being out in that freezing cold, wet weather, I know does not help anything. So that's an idea too. Coop space is so important if you're going to do that. These guys have, you know, they're a little crowded, but they have plenty of room in here. So that helps them a little bit in the winter so that they don't have pecking problems. You can also add like flock blocks, things like that. As far as rubbing things on combs and wattles, I've done that in the past. I've heard differing opinions on it, so I don't normally do it now. It may help, it may not, I don't know. But as far as treating this, if you're seeing that it's looking like it might be getting infected, Neosporin is something you can do. I'd suggest bringing them in if you're going to do it if it's still cold, because that stuff freezes and goops. And what you don't want to do is do a whole lot of rubbing on that damaged tissue. But Neosporin is one thing that can help with it. Just giving them good food. You know, I love to give them scrambled eggs with that Nutri-Drench and some poultry salt just to boost their overall condition. And the best thing you can do is make sure they're healthy going into winter in the first place. That's going to really help them make it through these cold winter months. So I hope this helps you a little. I hope it helps you identify frostbite in your flock and maybe not panic as much as you might like to. I know I spent a lot of years in a panic over it, and I felt terrible, and I still do. But we have just tried so many things, and we just still kind of deal with it. So the chickens seem to bounce back and do okay. If you have show chickens, this is not what you want, especially on these roosters. So show chickens you need to keep out of the cold. But otherwise, the chickens can bounce back from it. You just need to do everything that you can to keep them out of drafts, keep them, make sure that they have shelter, but they still need that ventilation too. So one thing that works well is to set up a warming station ahead of time if you know cold snap is coming. I'm going to just leave these up pretty much all winter, so I just have them handy. But I normally will use this in my detached garage, but during this last cold snap, it wasn't much over 20 in there, so it wasn't real helpful. So if you have a detached garage or a basement or, worst case scenario in your house, that's always good just to get them out of the cold if you need to, and you're just ready to go. The idea is to keep them warm enough to ward off any more frostbite danger, but to not overheat them. Because if you bring a chicken in that's used to being out in 10, 20 degrees and you throw them in a 70-degree house, that's going to be kind of difficult for them. But this area stays around 35, 40, a little higher maybe, and that's okay. That works great. Okay, in my second coop, these are mostly Brahmas, and they've done a lot better than the other coop as far as frostbite. They again have those closer combs, and that helps really well. I don't know if you can see on the rooster, he has just a tiny bit of black on the very tips. He did really well. And I feel this coop is not insulated. It stays pretty close to what the other, what the outside temperature is. So they were in about 0.5 degrees for about 13 days straight. This up here is all hardware cloth that I put some plexiglass over, and then I also put that construction plastic over the outside so it cuts way down on like direct breezes, because they're just too close. I'd be right over them. We also have one of those, I think it's called baffling, I'm not sure, but we have the same system here, but we do end up blocking this one off because it's open to the north and the west. We just get pummeled by winds and stuff. So again, that'd be direct, too much air, but there's plenty of ventilation in here. Got another window there. They have lots of ventilation. One thing I do is I make sure bedding is clean and dry, which means in this case I'm cleaning it out pretty frequently, maybe once a month, every 3 weeks. If it starts getting it all yucky, moist, I get it out and I get fresh in. And I'm trying to put in some new fresh right before I know it's going to get really cold too, to cut down on that moisture. So that's a look at our coops. I hope that helps you. Identifying frostbite gives you some ideas to prevent it and maybe treat it. I'd love to hear your ideas if you live in a climate like this where you're not having frostbite, whether it's your coop design you think does it or whatever. I'd love to hear those ideas because we do struggle. So thanks so much for watching. Please subscribe to our channel so you don't miss any of our videos.